So many of you may be thinking, what does loss have to do with brain health? Well, we're all on an infinite journey where we go from love to loss and then back to love. But because of our mindset, a lot of the times we get stuck in loss and we don't know how to get back to love. Now, there are over 40 different loss events that will affect all of our lives, which means each and every one of us are going to have multiple major losses throughout our life. Yet most of us have not been taught how to lovingly move beyond any kind of loss and get back into love. So, what are some of the loss events? Yes, death of a loved one is our major one. And that's the one when I talk about loss, most people go immediately to death. But as I said, there's over 40 different ones. So, after that comes a divorce, separation, job loss, your health, your wealth, your pets. And during the last few years, a lot of the minor ones have come to the forefront: loss of freedom, status, choice, identity, changing work conditions, recreational and social activities. So when loss comes to visit, our beliefs and our avoidance behaviours kick in, which is why we can go down and down and down and find ourselves on the floor wondering how the hell are we ever going to get back up? Because we've gone into our mind and our mind is saying, this is bad. You are never going to be the same again. And this is devastating. Your life is just about over because of whatever that loss event was. So when we understand that loss is actually here to assist us to move into the person who we came here to be. Now, that's a really hard concept to understand, especially when you've had a lot of major losses in your life. And I've had quite a few. But let's think for the moment about a job loss, because a lot of us have probably had that in our life. And in order to do that, I'd like to introduce you to Ray. Now, Ray was a manager that I worked with and had the privilege of working with at Dreamworld. And believe me, Dreamworld was an amazing place to work in the 80s and 90s. It's probably why I stayed there for 14 years. But Ray wasn't my immediate boss. He was the boss that was in charge of the front office and all of the entertainment in the park. But he was a person that knew every single person's name of the 400 permanent staff that were there. But not only did he know your name and who you were, he also knew your husband and your children's names, or your wife in the case of a man's. And he would walk the park and he'd say good morning to everyone. And then in the early 90s, Dreamworld went into receivership. And unfortunately, Ray was one of the ones, the senior managers, who lost his job. Now, Ray had a belief that at 58, he probably will never get a job like Dreamworld ever again. And he loved Dreamworld. But I didn't tell you, previously, before Ray came to Dreamworld, he was actually the CEO of Qantas out of Heathrow Airport. So he had some major roles in his life. But when he lost Dreamworld, he went down. He had this belief that he was never going to get another job like that. His health started to suffer. And because he never got that job, he started to, tip into his investments. And before he knew it, he had lost a lot of his money. His health was failing. His wife and his adult children were wondering how on earth can they help Ray. Unfortunately, Ray passed away from cancer not long after leaving Dreamworld. Now, I stayed in touch with Ray because he was an amazing man and he was always fun. And then years later, when I found myself choosing redundancy, when my much-loved CFO role was being merged with another company and I wasn't going to be CFO anymore, I thought about Ray. And I thought, I'm not going to let those beliefs that Ray had come into my life. 15 months prior to that, my husband and I had found our beautiful 27-year-old son, Dan, passed away at our back door. Now, that was horrific. And what did I do? Well, I went into the beliefs that we've all had for centuries. Just keep busy, give it time, everything will be all right. And of course it wasn't. I went into my behavior, my avoidance behaviors, big time. What are some of these avoidance behaviors? Food, alcohol, drugs, anger, working too much, exercising too much, isolation, Netflix, social media, sex, too little, too much. And they're both avoidance. And then, of course, the old-time favorite that we've all decided to call retail therapy, shopping too much, avoidance, 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 avoidance. Now, when we understand that most of them are socially accepted behaviors, it's only when we go into excess that we need to actually stop ourselves and go, am I avoiding? Is it because of this horrific event that has happened in my life? Because when a horrific event happens, it's painful. It's very emotional. And because we don't know what to do, and we have these amazing beliefs in our heads, which probably aren't even our beliefs, we've probably taken them on from our parents or our grandparents or even our teachers. And when we stop, we actually say, is there a better way? Is there a better way? And what I've found, the better way is the longest journey any of us will ever take. It's only a 12-inch journey, but it's from our head to our heart. Because that's where all the answers lie, in our heart. But too often, we're in our head and we get stuck there. I like to refer to it as the itty-bitty shitty committee. Because let's face it, that head, the way we think and the way we speak to each other can be really, really bad. And we end up, as I said, on the ground, not knowing how to come up. And that's why in my Gift of Loss program, which I want to make clear, I've called it the Gift of Loss, not because of the loss event, but because of who you become because of that loss event. If you choose to stop, you have to stop. You can't keep running like I did for 15 months. And what I could have done after I chose redundancy. But I knew when I chose redundancy that I wasn't going to be an accountant anymore. And I have to tell you, I wasn't really good at an accountant. But I just knew that there was things happening in my life to go, okay, Karen, you've had your fun now. Now's the time to get on to what you came here to do. You can use your accounting brain and that thing that I always loved. I had to find a better way to do things. I'm a Gemini. I get bored really quickly. So I honestly had to find a better way to do this boring task. And that's what I did with loss when I created the Gift of Loss program, because I knew that we're coming into a time where we need to know how to move beyond loss more quickly. We can't go down and down and down. So when we know how to travel up the 5-step staircase of the Gift of Loss, that's when we can improve our mental health. That's how we can improve our vibration, when we can find that better feeling thought so that we can come up and up and up, so that we can vibrate higher. Because when we do vibrate higher, we actually start to think more clearly. We can see possibilities, and we live in a world of endless possibilities. One of my favorite things to do is to stand on the ocean and to look at the horizon. And every time I do, I go, there's endless possibilities. So after you stop and you look at what has happened, you start to say, what does this mean for me now? And from there, you go into acceptance, because you accept what has happened, because you know, as sad as it is, you can't change it. It's happened for whatever reason. And you may be years before you ever find out what that true reason was all about. But when you do look back, you will clearly see that that was a pivotal moment in your life. And from there, you're going to identify, where you can start to identify all of the hopes, dreams, and aspirations that you had for that relationship. How you can look at it and realize that you may not be able to create those hopes, dreams, and aspirations the way you had planned, but you can still create them, just in a different way, because you are the only person you are going to spend your entire life with. There is no one else you spend 24/7 with. You. So when you realize that, not from a selfish point of view, but from I'm here for a reason and I matter. And then you move into the third step, which is all about the identity. Oh, sorry, we were on the third step, wasn't we? But there's another part of it, though. It's when you deep dive into that relationship and you start to look at all of the things that you would like to apologize for, all of the things that you would like to forgive, and all of the things that you'd like to acknowledge. Because in every relationship, there are two people. And there are always things that we all do and say, and things that we wish we hadn't done and said, and wish that we had done and said. But in the aspects of, there's three aspects to those relationships. And the first one is the physical. It's the way we hang out together, the things we do, the things we say, the way we touch each other. Then there's the emotional. And that's all encompassing of the good, the bad, the glad, and the sad. And of course, the spiritual aspect. That's that intangible part. We know that we're connected to that person, place, and thing, but we just don't know why we are so connected to it. So when the relationship ends, we only lose the physical. The emotional and the spiritual live on forever. It's the emotional that causes us all our pain. But the emotional heart is there to guide you. It's there to assist you. It's actually your best friend. If we choose to deep dive into those emotions to find those answers, especially where they appear in your body, they give you so much guidance on how to heal that emotion. Because when you do, it does what it's exactly called to be: energy in motion, emotion. And then once you do that, you go on to the fourth step, is where you complete the relationship. And what you're completing is the emotional part, the physical part. You're saying goodbye to that. Because remember, the emotional will live on, and so will the spiritual. And from there, you do the fifth step, is where you pivot, where you deep dive into you, all areas of your life. And then you figure out where you are now and where you want to be. And then you figure out how you can close that gap and come there. But it all starts with you realizing that you haven't been educated, more than likely, on how to move beyond loss. But there is a more loving way. And you get to choose every time loss comes into your life. Will I just avoid it? Or will I learn the lessons that these emotions are here to teach me? Or will I stay in my head and blame everyone? It's always up to you. You always have a choice. But remember, you're on an infinite journey that goes from love to loss and then back up for love. The easier way you learn how to come back to love, the quicker that you will do so. So that's how you ensure that when you know how to move beyond any kind of loss, you can get out of your head and you can create your better everyday life. Thank you.